Every year, in one Asian country, more than 600 people die from a single species of wildlife. Not an isolated incident, a number that repeats year after year, according to that country's own official statistics. Guess the culprit. Not the Bengal tiger. Annual tiger deaths in India don't come close to a sixth of that number. Not the king cobra, even though a single bite can kill an adult in a matter of hours. Not the saltwater crocodile, still regarded as the most feared predator across South Asia's wetlands. The leading culprit has no killer fangs, no venom, no claws, and biologically speaking, it doesn't even hunt. It eats nothing but plants. It's the elephant. The answer sounds like a mistake, but here's the stranger part. Hidden beneath the inch-thick skin of an adult bull elephant is a small gland sitting between the eye and the ear. For most of its life, that gland stays nearly silent, just a slightly darker patch of skin nobody notices. But for a few weeks each year with no warning, no fixed seasonal rhythm like a deer or an elk, capable of striking in any month, it begins seeping a dark, pungent fluid that runs down both sides of the face. And when it does, testosterone in that animal's bloodstream spikes to 60 times its normal level. Not 60%, 60 times. This state has a name, musth. For its duration, what's standing there is no longer a gentle, plant-eating body. It's 6 tons of mass, moving with an intent no one can predict, capable of attacking individuals it was once close to, and, according to that same statistic mentioned above, responsible for most of those 600+ deaths a year. And here's the next strange part. There's a name you use almost every day, without knowing it was once a real elephant, with a heartbeat, with fear, and eventually, with a specific death, recorded down to the date. Jumbo, a jumbo burger, a jumbotron hanging over a stadium, a jumbo bag of chips on a supermarket shelf. The word has worked its way so deep into English that no one remembers it once had an owner. But before it was an adjective, jumbo was the given name of an African bush elephant, captured as a calf in Sudan around 1861, passed between a few European zoos, and finally settled at the London Zoo, where he became the most famous elephant on Earth for nearly 20 years, before being sold to America in 1882 to P.T. Barnum's Circus, for a price that shocked British public opinion at the time. When news of the sale broke, hundreds of thousands of Britons, including children who'd climbed onto Jumbo's back every weekend, signed protest letters, sent all the way to Queen Victoria, begging that their friend not be allowed to leave the country. The elephant left anyway. He docked in New York, and over the following 3 years, paraded through dozens of American cities. Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, while thousands of American children lined up for hours just to ride on his back, to hand him buns and apples straight from their fingers, to touch the bark-thick skin of a creature standing over 10 feet tall. America taught itself to love the elephant that way. Gray, enormous, clumsy, gentle to the point of being almost comic grateful, mournful, famous for never forgetting. We built an entire museum of collective memory around it, added to generation after generation. Dumbo, with the ears that fly, released in 1941, teaching American children that what makes you different can also be your superpower. Baba, in a 3-piece suit and dress shoes, ruling a kingdom of elephants as civilized as any human one. The circus elephant, kneeling on command, standing on its hind legs, wearing a hat, giving audiences the feeling that underneath that grey skin was a soul almost human, just waiting to be tamed. That's the image we want to believe, but you already heard the real numbers behind it. One small gland, one hormonal storm, and more than 600 deaths a year. The question isn't, is the elephant dangerous? The question is, what is actually happening inside a body built entirely for eating plants? A body that never evolved to kill, that allows it to become this. And why? In so many of the cases we're about to break down, the culprit isn't just that hormonal storm. Sometimes, the real culprit is what the animal remembers. Forget the picture in your head of an elephant grazing on the plains. The reality is far more punishing. This is a body living in a state of permanent energy deficit, only a few bad feeding days away from starvation. An adult elephant must consume between 200 and 400 pounds of plant matter every day. The weight of one, sometimes two grown men, forced down its throat every 24 hours just to stay alive, not even counting the energy needed to walk tens of miles a day. Its digestive system absorbs less than 40% of what it eats, so inefficient that it's forced to feed almost continuously, 16 to 18 hours a day. With none of the long downtime a well-fed lion enjoys after a kill, sleeping 20 hours straight. For an elephant, there's no such thing as a full meal, just an eating cycle that never really stops. And that body needs water, with an equally punishing frequency, hundreds of liters a day, forcing the herd to constantly stay within reach of a reliable water source, whether a river, a lake, or a hole dug by hand out of a dry streambed using tusks and front feet. Behind that enormous appetite is an obscure anatomical detail that determines the entire lifespan of this species. Elephants don't have fixed teeth the way humans do. Over its lifetime, it goes through 6 different sets of molars, growing in one after another from the back of the mouth, gradually pushing the old set forward until it wears down and falls out a mechanism called horizontal tooth replacement, completely different from the way human teeth erupt from below. The problem is, by the 6th and final set of molars, usually appearing somewhere between age 40 and 60, there's no replacement left. Once that last set wears out, the elephant loses the ability to chew tough vegetation. Its health collapses, and in most cases in the wild, it dies of malnutrition, not old age in the conventional sense. In other words, the real biological clock of a wild elephant isn't measured in years. It's measured in how many times its jaw can still regrow, and this energy-devouring body needs space to match. A wild elephant herd in India or Southeast Asia requires a migration corridor stretching tens, sometimes hundreds of miles, linking one season to the next dry season ground here, wet season ground there, a water source somewhere in between, and sometimes a mineral-rich patch of earth. The herd deliberately seeks out to replenish sodium, something almost entirely absent from its plant-based diet. This isn't preference, it's a survival formula written by millions of years of evolution. And that root is preserved, generation after generation, in the memory of the herd's oldest females. Now look at what's changed, not in theory, but in concrete data. In the Indian state of Assam, one of the highest density wild elephant regions on Earth, the ancient migration corridors elephants once used to move seasonally are now sliced apart by highways, railway lines, and rice paddies that run right up to the edge of the forest. Compared with a few decades ago, the amount of continuous forest a herd can travel through without brushing up against human settlement has shrunk considerably, forcing the routes their ancestors walked for centuries to be abandoned in favor of improvised, more dangerous paths that cut straight through where humans now live. This isn't elephants invading human territory. It's humans building homes, roads, and rice fields directly on top of corridors. This species used long before any of us were born. Nature didn't change its survival formula. We changed the map that formula is forced to run on. In Sri Lanka, an island nation far smaller than India, but with one of the highest elephant-to-human population densities in Asia, this dynamic is even sharper. Nearly half of the elephant's historical range on the island now sits outside official protected areas, interwoven directly with farmland. For a species forced to move constantly in search of 200 to 400 pounds of food a day, living interwoven with humans isn't a choice. It's a mandatory condition for survival, in a world where old-growth forest keeps getting scarcer. If you had to pick one part to dissect in this biological machine called the elephant, it wouldn't be the tusks, and it wouldn't be the ears. It would be the trunk. An elephant's trunk contains an estimated 40,000 individual muscle bundles compared with roughly 600 muscles in the entire human body. Not a single bone runs through it. It operates entirely on hydrostatic pressure, the same principle behind an octopus arm letting it uproot a tree weighing hundreds of pounds, and, in the same motion, pick up a single peanut without cracking the shell. The tip of the trunk also carries a dense network of nerve endings, sensitive enough to be compared to a human fingertip, letting an elephant tell the shape, temperature, and surface texture of an object with the lightest touch. But the more astonishing engineering isn't in the trunk, it's in the feet. Buried in the thick fat pad under each elephant foot pad are thousands of tiny sensory receptors, Pacinian corpuscles capable of detecting extremely faint seismic vibrations traveling through the ground. When another elephant 6 miles away, sometimes farther, lets out an infrasonic call, a frequency so low the human ear can never register it, that sound wave doesn't just travel through the air, it also travels through the earth, as a seismic wave, moving more efficiently over long distances than a sound wave through air. And the elephant standing there receiving that signal isn't hearing it with its ears, it's hearing it with its bones. The vibration moves up from the foot, through the leg, through the skull, and straight into the inner ear, completely bypassing the eardrum. Scientists call this bone conduction. Research published in 2026, using laser vibrometry on the temporal bones of both elephants and humans, even found that elephants can actively narrow their ear canals using a special ring muscle around the ear canal, an ability humans simply don't have to cancel out airborne sound and focus their entire receptive capacity on this underground vibration channel. In other words, when an elephant stands motionless, head lowered, weight shifted forward onto its feet, ears spread wide across the plain, it isn't zoning out. It's listening with its entire skeleton, picking up signals from individuals miles away. Some studies have recorded distances of 6 miles or more, signals that you, standing right next to it, will never feel, even though the ground under your own feet is vibrating exactly the way it is under its. Alongside that is another anatomical detail often overlooked. Elephant bone is nearly solid, lacking the large, hollow marrow cavity found in most other mammals, a necessary trade-off to bear the animal's enormous body weight without fracturing while walking. That same solid bone structure is also precisely why bone-conducted vibration works so well in elephants. A dense skeletal frame carries seismic waves far more efficiently than ordinary porous bone. Now put two elephant species side by side, African and Asian. At a glance, they look like they simply differ in size. The truth is far more subtle. The tip of an African elephant's trunk has two finger-like lobes, one on top, one on the bottom, letting it pinch objects with something close to a pincer grip, similar to how a human thumb and index finger work together. An Asian elephant has only one lobe, on top, forcing it to wrap the whole trunk around an object instead, the way a person might use a full hand instead of two fingers. The differences don't stop there. African elephant ears are large, shaped almost exactly like the continent of Africa itself, a massive, blood vessel-rich radiator that helps cool the body in savanna heat as the animal constantly fans its ears. Asian elephant ears are smaller and more compact, suited to shaded, dense forest, where the need for heat dissipation isn't as urgent. Both male and female African elephants can grow large tusks. In Asian elephants, only some males develop full tusks, while most females show almost none externally. Even the shape of the spine differs. An African elephant's back tends to curve, slightly concave in the middle, while an Asian elephant's back arches upward like a dome. Two designs, two different climate and habitat problems. The same underlying principle. Every millimeter of this body has been fine-tuned for survival within the specific ecosystem it belongs to. Nothing here is accidental, and nothing here can be swapped for the other without a cost. There's one more system, less discussed than the trunk, but no less critical for survival. The skin. Elephant skin runs up to an inch thick across the back, but is almost paper-thin around the mouth and inside the ears, where a dense network of blood vessels sits close to the surface, allowing the body to shed heat quickly just by constantly fanning the ears through the hottest hours of the day. That's why you'll rarely see an elephant completely still under harsh sun. The ears are always in motion, like two biological fans, keeping blood temperature from crossing a dangerous threshold for a body weighing up to 6 tons. That skin, thick as it is far from a perfect shield. It cracks into thousands of tiny fissures across the entire body, not a sign of age or disease, but an active design. Those fissures hold moisture and mud longer than flat skin would, helping the elephant fend off sunburn and insects more effectively after every mud bath. An elephant doesn't bathe in mud for fun. It bathes in mud to survive the middle of the day. And then there are the tusks, the most misunderstood weapon on this animal's body. Elephant tusks are, in fact, a pair of incisors that never stop growing for the entire life of the animal, unlike any other tooth in its body. They're used to dig for minerals, strip bark, and, in rare cases, for self-defense. But that very same relentless growth has also been a death sentence hanging over the species for more than a century, because to humans, a long pair of tusks means a valuable commodity, and that value has put millions of individuals in the crosshairs of a hunting rifle. In August of 1993, near the Burhachapuri and Laukawa wildlife sanctuaries in Assam, India, in the span of a single week, wild elephants killed more than 50 people. The subsequent investigation noted a striking detail. More than half of those deaths were traced to a single individual, a bull, local residents called a rogue elephant, moving alone, striking without warning, at multiple locations across the same region within the same short window of time. This is precisely the behavioral pattern researchers associate with musth. A lone bull, unable to control its impulses, moving outside normal patterns, reacting extremely to any human presence along its path. This wasn't an isolated incident blown out of proportion. According to data released by India's Ministry of Environment before Parliament in 2024, human-elephant conflict claimed 2,853 human lives over the most recent 5-year period, with 2023 alone reaching a peak of 628 deaths, the highest on record for that span. The states of Odisha, Jharkhand, and West Bengal bore the heaviest toll, recording more than 600, nearly 500, and more than 400 deaths respectively over that same 5-year window. Looking at a longer stretch, earlier government data shows that between 2015 and 2018, wild elephants were connected to more than 1,700 human deaths in India on average, more than one person dying every single day across the country from conflict with elephants or tigers. One thing needs to be said clearly, consistent with the core principle of this species. Most of these deaths do not come from a deliberate, calculated attack strategy, the way a predator might plan an ambush. They come from sudden collisions. A farmer who happens to be standing between a bull in musth and the path it's walking. A family asleep in a straw hut, sitting directly on the route an 80-strong herd uses to move through the fog at night toward a rice field. Someone riding a motorbike down a village road that happens to run parallel to a trail elephants have used for generations. The weapon isn't a fang or a claw, it's mass and momentum. A single blow from an elephant's head, a single step from a foot weighing hundreds of pounds, is enough to crush a human pelvis in a fraction of a second. No intent required, just pure physics. Several tons of mass moving at tens of miles an hour, meeting a human body weighing under 200 pounds. And there's another side to this conflict rarely mentioned in the media: the price the elephants themselves pay. Over that same 2015 to 2018 period, more than 370 elephants died in India from electrocution, being struck by trains, poisoning, or retaliatory killing following attacks on humans. It's a two-way spiral of violence, where both species are paying the price for the same crisis over shrinking space. It isn't just India. In high-density elephant regions of eastern and southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, a similar pattern repeats every harvest season when elephants are drawn in by the smell of ripening corn and sugarcane on farms bordering protected reserves. Local conservation groups in these regions have documented that most crop raiding and human attack incidents occur at night during harvest season, exactly when natural food in the forest is scarcest and the smell of human-grown food is most tempting to a body permanently running a calorie deficit. One more detail worth noting: from the same Sonitpur research, community monitoring squads set up in 2004 to drive elephants away from rice fields at night helped cut conflict-related deaths from more than 20 a year down to roughly 5 or 6 a year between 2015 and 2022. It's evidence that most fatal collisions aren't inevitable. They're a direct consequence of a shrinking physical buffer between the two species, and that buffer, at least in part, can still be managed by human effort. Elephants don't run politics the way you've heard described for chimpanzees or dolphins, alliances, betrayals, revenge plots. Elephant society operates on a completely different logic. A matriarchy, where the oldest female, the matriarch, carries the herd's entire survival map inside her own memory. The location of water during the worst drought anyone alive remembers, sometimes decades in the past. The safe route around a lion's territory, the memory of exactly where a massacre once took place. When that matriarch dies, her decades of accumulated knowledge isn't passed down through language, it's passed down simply because the younger elephants who followed her long enough have already etched that route into their own reflexes. Elephants also display behavior researchers describe as close to mourning. They stop beside the body of a dead individual, even the body of another species, and gently touch the skull or bones with their trunk, sometimes standing in silence for hours before moving on. This behavior isn't taught. It shows up consistently across different elephant populations on different continents, with no direct contact between those populations. Alongside mourning behavior is a child-rearing mechanism called allo-mothering, collective mothering. A calf isn't raised by its biological mother alone. Every female in the herd, even ones that have never given birth themselves, takes part in protecting, teaching, and even lending the calf body warmth while it sleeps. This is exactly the social network a young male elephant needs to learn emotional and behavioral regulation before splitting from the herd as an adolescent. When that network gets torn apart by a gun, a culling operation, a massacre for tusks, what's destroyed isn't just specific lives. It's the entire social infrastructure the survivors need in order to grow up normally. And that's precisely where this story turns darker than anything you'd expect. Between 1992 and 1997, at the Pilanesberg Reserve in South Africa, a group of adolescent male African elephants, all of them orphans, relocated there from regions where culling operations had taken place at Kruger National Park the decade before, began doing something no researcher had ever documented in this species. They started killing white rhinos, not one or two. More than 40 rhinos were killed by these adolescent bulls over 5 years. Behavior never before described in any scientific literature on elephants. Scientists, including researcher G.A. Bradshaw, along with co-authors Alan Shaw, Janine Brown, Joyce Poole, and Cynthia Moss, publishing in the journal Nature in 2005 under the title Elephant Breakdown, offered an explanation that stopped the scientific community in its tracks. As calves, these young bulls had watched their families gunned down in culling operations, the gunfire, the bodies of their mothers and other females collapsing right in front of them, then been torn from normal social structure and moved to unfamiliar land to be resettled. And critically, they grew up with absolutely no older bull elephants present. Animals that would normally restrain young males and delay the onset of musth until they were mature enough to handle that hormonal storm. With no older brother figure to keep order, these adolescent males entered musth abnormally early, some as young as 11 or 12, instead of the usual age of 25 to 30 for a healthy wild bull, and stayed in that state continuously for months at a time, instead of the usual few weeks a year for a normal adult male. The eventual fix wasn't a fence. It wasn't a sedative. It wasn't culling the aggressive individuals. Reserve managers brought in 6 mature, older bull elephants from Kruger National Park itself, where elephant social structure remained intact. Within months, the rhino killings stopped completely. The mere presence of older males in the herd, with no medical intervention or behavioral training required, immediately reduced both the frequency and intensity of musth in the younger ones, returning them to a normal physiological cycle. This isn't simple instinct, and it isn't cruelty by any definition we've applied to chimpanzees or dolphins. It's scientific evidence, published in one of the most respected journals on Earth, showing that violence in elephants can originate from a social structure broken by human hands, then carried forward through each individual's own physiology: testosterone, musth timing, capacity for self-restraint in a way that closely resembles what psychologists describe as post-traumatic stress. In humans, children who witness violence grow up without a model for emotional regulation and reenact that violence in a different form against a different target. Years later, elephants don't forget. That old saying turns out to be more accurate than anyone imagined when they first said it as a light-hearted compliment. It's just that what they remember sometimes isn't what we'd want them to, and the consequences of that memory don't stop with the elephant carrying it. They spread to whichever species happens to be standing closest. All 3 surviving elephant species on Earth are currently facing alarming conservation status. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, the African forest elephant, Loxodonta cyclotis, has been listed as critically endangered since March of 2021, with its population estimated to have declined more than 86% over the past 3 decades, according to data published by the African Wildlife Foundation. The African savanna elephant, Loxodonta africana, is listed as endangered, with populations down roughly 60% since 1965, meaning that within just 2 elephant generations, more than half of every individual that ever existed has disappeared. The Asian elephant, Elephas maximus, is also listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List, with an estimated 25 to 35,000 wild individuals left across the entire continent, a number so small that the entire wild Asian elephant population on Earth is roughly equivalent to the population of a single mid-sized town. The leading causes remain ivory poaching and habitat loss. According to CITES data, tons of smuggled ivory are still seized every year at international ports and airports. Proof that even though the international ivory trade ban has been in effect since 1989, demand has never truly disappeared. Every seized set of tusks represents an individual that died, and in most cases, that individual was a mature bull, exactly the age and size needed to pass its genes on to the herd. Over the long run, this size-selective poaching pressure has left an unsettling evolutionary consequence. In some elephant populations in Mozambique, heavily hunted over decades of civil war, the proportion of females born entirely tuskless has risen significantly, a form of forced natural selection, where humans, not the environment, are reshaping this species' gene pool in just a handful of generations. But there's a physical consequence almost no one talks about, and it connects directly to the very mechanism we just broke down in Part 3. As traditional migration corridors get sliced apart by highways, railways, and industrial development, the ground elephants use to send and receive seismic signals that infrasonic language, millions of years in the making, is now saturated with constant mechanical noise. Truck engines, rail vibration, construction machinery, blasting from mining operations near some reserves. For a species that depends on hearing its warnings the location of a poacher, the direction another herd is moving, the safe distance it needs to keep from humans through vibrations traveling underground. A fragmented habitat doesn't just take away physical space, it's choking off the very sensory system this species relies on to survive. Quite literally, the most critical warning signal can end up buried under the mechanical noise of the very civilization encroaching on its territory. An elephant pushed into an ever-shrinking patch of forest, surrounded by constant mechanical noise, isn't just hungry and thirsty. It's operating in a state of partial blindness toward the exact language its ancestors spent millions of years perfecting, forced to rely instead on far less reliable eyesight and smell to detect danger at a distance, in precisely the situations where it needs the most accurate information to avoid colliding with humans. An early warning system, perfected over millions of years, is being disabled not by any natural enemy, but by the noise of development itself. Back to Jumbo. After years of parading through American cities, delighting millions of children who'd once held out buns and apples for him to take from their hands on a September night in 1885, in the town of Street, Thomas, Ontario, Canada, Jumbo was struck by a freight train while being led across a rail line after an evening performance. The elephant, who had become a symbol of gentleness, of entertainment, of America's affection for animals, killed under the wheels of exactly the kind of infrastructure humans built to serve their own civilization. On the very rail line he'd been walked across safely hundreds of times before. It's hard to find a more precise image for what's happening to the entire species. 140 years later, a beloved creature, commercialized, turned into a cultural icon, while the very infrastructure of the civilization that celebrated it is now the single greatest threat to its survival. Jumbo's rail line is now the highway cutting through Assam. Jumbo's freight train is now the cargo train striking herds crossing the tracks in West Bengal every migration season. The elephant isn't a monster, and it isn't the gentle giant we boxed it into either. To sell circus tickets, to print on the covers of children's books, to teach our kids about kindness in nature. It's a creature carrying two parallel systems inside it, both rooted, at their core, in the same thing. Its complicated, sometimes brutal, relationship with humanity. A body that can be overturned by its own hormones for a few weeks each year. A physiological storm it can't control on its own. One that can only be regulated by the presence of older individuals within its own herd. And a memory capable of holding trauma across generations, triggered not by some primitive instinct, but by exactly what our species did to it: gunfire. The shattering of families, the relentless shrinking of living space. The saying "an elephant never forgets" has lived in folklore for centuries, treated as a charming compliment about memory, the kind of thing we still repeat in children's books, in cute stories about smart animals. No one ever expected that, one day, science would prove that, saying true in a far darker sense, that the orphaned herds of Pilanesberg carried the memory of gunfire, of families collapsing in front of them while they were still calves, and turned that memory into violence against another species, years after the wound was supposed to have healed, hundreds of miles from where the tragedy actually happened. Next time you see an elephant in a zoo, on a screen, on the logo of a children's toy brand, or simply in a photo from someone's vacation, remember, you're looking at a creature capable of remembering the face of whoever harmed its family for decades, capable of hearing vibrations under the ground that you will never feel, and capable of carrying, inside its own body, a hormonal storm powerful enough to erase every gentle stereotype we've ever pinned on it, in a matter of weeks. Jumbo's story, in the end, was never really a story about one elephant. It's a story about how humans always want to turn the greatest creatures on Earth into something easy to understand, easy to sell tickets for, easy to print on a cover, while most of what's actually true about them stays well outside the reach of that imagination. We did this with elephants for a century and a half, tamed the image first, and only learned too late, and usually through casualty counts, what was actually happening inside its body and its memory. And right now, as you're watching this, there's a good chance that somewhere far from here, an elephant is standing motionless in a field, head lowered, listening with its entire skeleton, and there's a good chance it's remembering us too.